It seems strange to think of ourselves as living on the shores of materialism, where people have to be coaxed to be spiritual. Master's words about the contrast between America and India. He was brought to America by God, and he was born for the work in America, but it's really hard for us even to imagine in 1920 what he came into. And yet at the same time there's this magnificent spirit of openness and determination and energy and innovation and revolution that makes America what it is. And more than that, Babaji had a plan. Master used the words, Kriya Yoga will spread around the world and foster a realization of the brotherhood of man. I was really trying to think how far we are from such an idea, quite apart from country to country or culture to culture. Just how distantly we live from each other, even in our own hearts. The kind of absolute openness that Master offered, unique. Only those who in themselves experience God and open their eyes and see nothing but God around them have the unselfish courage to be able to do that. Of the many pictures, many unexplained pictures of Master that have just accumulated over time, there is one of him when he must have just been first coming to this country, must have been, in his 30s, and he's standing next to that old man in the wheelchair. And the man in the wheelchair is very shrunken, as people sitting in wheelchairs often can be. And Master is so vital. He has his hands on the arm and he's leaning over with all his energy. And of course, merely because that man was shrunken didn't necessarily mean that his consciousness was asleep. Elder bodies just become very weak. But you can feel this tremendous power that Master is exerting, trying to bring him into true wakefulness. Whether or not he was going to ever wake up dynamically in that body again, he wanted him to wake up into the spirit. And Master he came to this country, as he said himself, without a single friend, and then immediately began to put up posters and put out lectures, and thousands of people came, and you see photographs of him standing in front of these huge auditoriums. And all of the vibrations were so completely different than they are in America, where Master's perfect phrase, you have to coax people to be spiritual. Swamiji describes it that America is built on this pioneering spirit, and we've always been much more anxious to get it done than to understand the meaning behind what we're doing. And of course, both sides are needed. So Master stood in front of these American audiences with a message that they'd never even imagined. I mean, there were inklings, Thoreau and Emerson and others. They brought threads in. It wasn't complete ignorance, but it was very close to it. And he stood like he did in front of all those audiences. And it's so interesting when you see him speak or move. I was trying to think about it. It's like, here is the seat of ego in the body. Here's the medulla. And in extremely egoic people, you see them moving their heads all the time. Many of the people who show up on television move their heads all the time. When Master, it's like there was no movement here at all. He moved his body. You could see in the movies, he moved it like this. And it wasn't that he was stiff, it was just that there was nothing compelling any energy at this point. There was the spiritual eye, there was the heart, there was the whole spine, but he moved like this, but without being stiff. It's just that everything in him came from such a different place. And in that awareness, he was absolutely unafraid. You know, he knew that he was always moving as God was asking him to move. There's this story of when the cousin of a friend or someone like that had died, and there was such a wailing, and Master was nearby, and he went into the house and he brought the man back into his body. And then someone asked him, "Did you do that because you were acquainted with him, or he was a relative of a friend, or did you do it because Divine Mother told you to?" "Oh," he said, "I would never have done anything that Divine Mother didn't tell me to do." And it was so out of the question for him to have ever done anything that Divine Mother didn't tell him to do. Just so calmly and perfectly he moved through his life from birth, just always knowing, I have only one reality, and that reality is my perfect identity with the infinite, and my only purpose to be here is to be a perfect instrument of that. All of us strive to do that, but Master had perfected it. And he made that wonderful statement, we all move by the repeated actions, make grooves in the brain, like the way a record is grooved. And then the needle of our life goes into it, into that phonograph record, and it just follows, just like that. Once it's hooked in, it just follows. And so we find ourselves, male or female, Indian or American. I was thinking the autobiography of a yogi was published in 1946, and I was born in 1947. It's like America had just received it. Master, of course, had been here for 25 years, but had just received this gospel that was destined to transform really the world, and certainly my own life. And so I slipped in, a little American girl born into Texas, just sort of started there, and all the little things you look back over your life, you just see how it all plays out just like that phonograph record. But the thing that we have to put into our consciousness now is not everything we did up until this moment, but what are we doing now? And that wonderful statement of Sri Yukteswar's, everything in future will improve if you're making a right spiritual effort now. Sometimes people have asked me, how are you? How are you doing? Oh, everything in future does improve. I just make it as a statement. That's how I am. Everything in future does improve if we continually make that right spiritual effort. And it feels complicated, but it isn't really. It's sometimes the karma God gives us is not easy to deal with. Sometimes we have periods where everything just rolls along. Sometimes we have incarnations. Swamiji said, when you see someone who has an incarnation that's just seemingly to go effortlessly well, he says, you don't see all that went in the time before to bring that person to that point of freedom. I remember somebody spoke about someone else, and Swami's response was very touching. He said, "Oh," and it was interesting. The woman was speaking with sort of envy, and Swami's answer to her was, "Oh, it will take you many lifetimes to be as free as that one is." It takes us many lifetimes to become as free as the masters are. There's no question about that. But when will we start? And how long will we wait? And how much are we enjoying what's going on in the present? Master made it all so simple. It's grooves in the brain that are created by repeated actions and thoughts and attitudes. And there's not too much we can do. about the melody that's already playing. But there's everything we can do about the melody that plays after. And I was starting to say sometimes the circumstances of life, one incarnation, especially when you're at the beginning of it, seems really big and long. It seems less long after a lot of it's gone by. But the main thing is we have this imaginary idea that an incarnation actually is the beginning and the end. It's not the beginning and the end of anything. That's how the Dalai Lama put it. We think of reincarnation as multiple different events. It's just one event. It's just the ascending or the twisting power of our consciousness. We're always conscious. We're always ourselves. We are always going to be experiencing whatever grooves we've put into our brain. So Master comes and says, take control of your destiny. The spine and the nervous system are the only place that God can be realized. Go inside and traverse through the centers, chanting Om at each of the chakras, just bringing that power of God deep within ourselves, making entirely new grooves, so that the mind and the brain and the heart and the spirit, when challenged, when at rest, when in waking, eating, dreaming, sleeping, serving, meditating, chanting, there will be this constant, silent hum. I belong to God, God belongs to me. There is no other love like the Master's love for me. There is no love except God's love. For us, through one another, we waste so much time. But we don't know we're wasting it. We think we're enjoying ourselves and doing what we must do. We do consider ourselves trapped by our grooves in our brain. But all we have to do is shift them. There's no future, you know, because when it is the future, it will be now. So there's really no waiting, because the effort we put in makes us who we're going to be next. Master said so beautifully, he said, take care of the minutes, he said, and the incarnations will take care of themselves. That's what we have to realize. It doesn't really matter what's happened until now. All that matters this minute. Am I loving God? Am I remembering God's love for me? Equally important. It's not just a question of what we give. In fact, it's not even primarily what we give. It's what we receive. That's what it says in the Bible. Receive Him. Master lives even now as vividly, as completely as he did when he was in that body. And he radiates the transforming power of his love. He radiates it as completely in this moment as it has ever been radiated. Every great master who lived, even now, stands as a beacon of light, sending it out. The only limitation is how courageously and completely we receive. For all who received him, he gave himself completely. Let that be our resolution for this new year. Open my heart, Lord. Enter. Show me your love and awaken within me my profound and infinite love for you.